Hello and welcome to another episode of Team Blush. Today we are going to be taking a look at how to make a purple domed Bosozoku Light. A brief explanation of what a Bosozoku Light is, and accompanying with the footage to my lower right from the YouTube channel Noriyaro. They have a lot of car culture videos from Japan, and I highly recommend that you go check them out. The Bosozoku Light was a purple-domed rotating emergency light used by the Bosozoku gangs in car culture in Japan. They used to place these emergency lights in multiple locations on the vehicle, the most popular of which being on the rear deck. And from what I am aware, they were used as a style choice by the Bosozoku and as kind of a middle finger to the law in Japan. My reasoning for making this video is due to the fact it is almost $90 to actually import those purple domed emergency lights from Japan. So instead, I'm going to show you how to DIY your own purple dome for these emergency lights. To achieve this, we are going to be using a process known as vacuum forming. And I'm not going to go over the specifics on this. I will leave a link down in the description of the video where you can see others go further into this process. But as a general overview, we are going to be making a mold of the original dome using a plaster of Paris mixture. We will be making a box that will allow us to pull vacuum from underneath our mold. And while we are pulling vacuum, we will want to be melting a piece of PETG plastic over the top of it. And to hold our plastic while we are doing this process, we will just make a really simple frame that we can then clamp down to hold our plastic. So without further ado, let's get on to the multi-step process of making a purple Bosozoku light. The first step of this process is to obviously take the dome off of the light assembly, and all this was 4 screws on the exterior of the dome, and it will pop off just like that. And we do not need this light assembly for the rest of the process, so we can put this aside. The next step of this process is going to be to make a plaster of Paris mold from our original dome light. This is just a practice one I did to make sure I had the process somewhat down before making the video, so you can get an idea of what we will be doing. To make our plaster of Paris mold with the original dome, we will need to invert the dome upside down so that we can pour our mixture of plaster in Paris and water into the dome itself. And to keep this upright while I am pouring the plaster of Paris mix, I just made this super simple little cardboard template for my dome to sit down in and keep it level while I am pouring the mix. Obviously, you will need your plaster of Paris mix. This is an 8-pound bucket, and this will be more than enough for our little project. I will put a link down in the description where you can get all this stuff in the video for the project. You will need some isopropyl alcohol or something to clean the interior of the dome before pouring the plaster of Paris mix to make sure that it is perfectly clean. After having cleaned the interior of the dome, you will want to use petroleum jelly or some sort of release agent for the plaster of Paris so that you can actually get the mold out of the dome once it has hardened. And believe me, it can be a pain, so you want to put a lot of this petroleum jelly or release agent on your dome. A measuring cup for the water for the plaster of Paris mix. And last up, just get a mixing bowl, preferably one that you are not worried about tossing out if the plaster of Paris ends up hardening. It is a very hard substance to actually get off of stuff once it has hardened. So keep that in mind when choosing your mixing bowl. And the actual last thing, a mixing spoon. I almost forgot about that. It would be hard to mix your plaster of Paris and water together without a mixing spoon. And again, be careful. Just make sure that you are using a spoon that you are not worried about losing, because the plaster of Paris will harden and it will be a huge pain to get it off of anything that you've let it harden to. Let's go ahead and clean our dome and get it ready for our release agent. I'm just going to take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, pour it on the inside, and wipe it up with some toilet paper. Once the dome has been sufficiently cleaned, we can go ahead and add our release agent. Again, remember to add quite a bit because it's hard to get out of the mold if you do not add enough. I am going to wear some kitchen gloves, I guess. I don't know where my other gloves went, so I'm just going to use some kitchen gloves to add the petroleum to the dome. And I'm using the petroleum jelly just because I had it laying around. If you have any other idea of what would be a better and cheap release agent, let me know down in the comments, because I would be curious. I'm not sure if this is the best thing that I could be using. And there we go. That is quite a bit of release agent, so we will go ahead and move to the next step. With our mold prepared for the Plaster of Paris mix, we can go ahead and start mixing it. Plaster of Paris will harden with a mixture of 2 to 1. For every 2 cups of Plaster of Paris, I will be adding 1 cup of water. Something to keep in mind when you are mixing your Plaster of Paris, make sure that you make more than you think you're going to use. You don't want to get into the process and have too little, because this stuff hardens so fast you will not be able to mix anymore. For this specific dome, I believe that I will use 6 cups of water and 12 cups of Plaster of Paris. Let's go ahead and start measuring out our Plaster of Paris. We have gotten our Plaster of Paris measured out into our mixing bowl. So now all we need to do is add our 6 cups of water. And once you've added the water, you just want to begin stirring it like crazy. You want to stir it to the consistency of almost a paste. Once we have it to that paste-like consistency, we are going to pour it into our dome that is right nearby. So let's go ahead and get that process going. Once you have poured your water into the Plaster of Paris powder, you will have, it says on the packaging, about 10 minutes to work with it. So there is definitely a little bit of a time crunch, but it's not horrible. So just begin stirring it into that paste-like consistency.
5 minutes later.
We have reached that paste-like consistency with the Plaster of Paris mix. And I'm just going to lay this piece of wood down so that while pouring, if I spill any, it won't get onto the table. But now we can get our dome that has been prepped with the release agent and go ahead and slowly pour our Plaster of Paris mix into it. With the Plaster of Paris poured, we can go ahead and take our mixing bowl and quickly clean it so that the Plaster of Paris mixture doesn't harden inside of it and destroy our mixing bowl and mixing spoon. Now that we have successfully poured our Plaster of Paris mixture into our dome, we unfortunately have to wait between 1 to 3 days. But while we're waiting for this to cure, we can go ahead and make what is known as a vacuum-forming buck. So this is what our finished vacuum-forming buck is going to resemble. Now, I'm not going to show you completely how to make this. I will leave some links down in the description of the video of other videos showing you how to make this vacuum form buck. But pretty much all it is a bottom, in my case, 12 by 12 piece of wood that I have gone and enclosed with 2 by 4 pieces of wood, 4 of them all the way around to just make a simple little box. In one of the 2 by 4s that I used to enclose the box, I drilled out this hole for my specific vacuum hose. And on top, I placed another piece of 12 by 12 wood that I then drilled a grid of holes into so that whenever I place my vacuum hose in this hole and turn it on, it will draw air down through these holes. The idea is once we have our mold that we have made from our plaster of Paris, this is one that I made as a test prior, we will be able to place it on our grid of holes, melt a piece of plastic, turn on the vacuum so that there is suction through these holes, and then place our melted plastic over the dome. That will then create an airtight seal that will wrap the plastic around our mold, and once it cools, we can take it off to hopefully have a perfect copy of our original dome. Many days have passed since I put the plaster of Paris mix into the mold, and as you can see, it is now completely hardened, and unfortunately, I think it's going to be a huge pain to get it out of there. I already tried drilling a screw really deep down into the middle of the plaster mold, but it's just not coming out. I don't know if I really recommend making a mold with this process. I think I could have placed a large washer and bolt inside the mold before allowing it to harden, but I did not do that, and I am instead going to go ahead and just cut this entire dome in half, sacrificing the original dome, but hopefully with a little bit of massaging, I will be able to get a somewhat decent mold out of this entire endeavor. So why don't you come in a little bit closer while we go ahead and tape off this dome best as possible. Maybe try and keep it in a straight line. Who knows, maybe we can glue it together in the future if I decide to do this again, which I'm more than likely not going to, but I just want that to be an option just in case. Okay, so I've gotten it taped off about as straight as I can really get it. I'm going to go ahead and cut it with a Dremel tool, and hopefully everything goes right. I don't think it will, but I can hope. A side note, if you are looking to buy a Dremel, do not get one with this battery pack thing. I've been meaning to do it, I just haven't found the right transformer to actually convert this over to just a wire, but these batteries are such a pain. I was just barely able to cut through this dome. I was being a little slow, but these batteries suck. Do not buy these with the batteries. Get them with the wire. I know it's a pain having a wire, having to plug it in and stuff, but it's well worth it. So let's go ahead and crack this open to see what we're working with in terms of a mold. Okay, let's go ahead and take you guys off the tripod. As you can see, the petroleum jelly made it so that the interior of the mold actually didn't harden. This has been sitting here for multiple upon multiple days. This should have hardened by now. So I definitely wouldn't recommend the petroleum jelly. Again, you guys might know something. Throw it down in the comments if you know a better release agent. The petroleum jelly, it was just way too hard to actually get it out of the original light dome. And as you can see, these swirl marks, and it just didn't harden. So I'm going to go ahead and probably let this sit overnight. It has been a few days and nights since I have left this mold out to go ahead and dry as best as possible. What I'm going to do next is lay down a thin layer of this vinyl spackling, and I hope that will get rid of a lot of these swirl marks and this big gouge in the middle of the mold that I made while taking it out of the light dome. So first off, I'm just going to sand down this mold just a little bit to give this spackling a little bit more grip to hold on to the mold as I lay it down. Now with that really just quickly sanded to give a little bit of texture to the mold, I'm going to go ahead and lay down this vinyl spackling. I'm going to try and lay it very thin so I can come back here in the next few hours and sand it and hopefully end up with a smooth mold. And this is going to be a longer process. Right now, I'm just trying to get this spackling into the deeper holes that ended up breaking off as I was undoing the light dome. And then once I get these larger holes and indentations out of the mold, I can go back and smooth it out later with a mixture of some more spackling and some more sanding. So again, just right now, trying to get rid of these really big holes. It has been a huge jump forward in time, but with quite a bit of work put into this mold, we've gotten it to the point where it's smooth enough that I think I'm going to be happy with the result. With the old mold, you can see all these indentations here. These really didn't come through with my first test melt over this mold, so I think that this will be good enough and it won't pick up a lot of these really minor surface inconsistencies. And I think with that, we're finally done with the preparation of this entire thing. We can head over into the kitchen and go ahead and heat up our plastic and get it ready to melt over our mold. Okay, so here we are prepared to finally melt our plastic over our dome and vacuum form it. We have our vacuum hose fed into our box, our fresh mold that I hope will give us a good product in the end, a 12 by 12 PETG plastic sheet that we are going to be clamping in our wooden frame with these bolts. I am going to go ahead and get the PETG sheet mounted inside of our frame, and then I will get right back to you. The plastic is mounted inside of the frame. So let's go over to the oven and I'll show you how I have it set up. This is the point in the video where I am probably going to recommend that you don't do things as I'm doing them. If you look up in the dictionary next to the word natural selection, you will definitely see a diagram of what I am currently doing. So what I have done is I have two pieces of wood holding my frame up and as close to the heating elements as I possibly can. I'm going to hit broil and the plastic in the frame is going to begin to warp and then start to bow down and sag. At that point, I will bring the frame back over to my little work area and let you guys see the results of the vacuum forming process. It's pretty cool, so I hope it goes well. those of you with keen eyes probably noticed that when I was melting the plastic, as cool as the process was, I definitely messed it up. Between the small space that I'm working in and having to film the YouTube video, I ended up overheating the plastic, and what happened was degassing occurred. That's what all of these little bubbles are. And as well as when you heat PETG plastic up too much for vacuum forming, you get this creasing. So this melt was completely ruined, and as well as the melt being completely ruined, I left the plastic on top of our mold for way too long. When you press the plastic over the mold, you only leave it there for a second or two at most before pulling it off, or else your mold will get stuck inside of it and you will have to basically chisel it out. Luckily, before doing this melt for the YouTube video, I ended up doing a practice one, and thankfully that one came out proper. This is the best melt that I was able to achieve with my process, and I'm not happy with it, but I'm also not disappointed. I think that I will be able to get a somewhat decent product out of this, but we'll have to see until the end of the video. So let's go ahead, and what we'll do next is cut out this dome and get it ready for a purple dye. And here we are just getting ready to dye. I'm going to be doing a practice dye on this crappy dome that I made for the video, so that should just fit right down in here. When using this dye, and by the way, I'm going to be using iDye Poly. It's a synthetic, I believe, polyester dye. Anyways, when using this, you want to make sure not to let any surface touch the edge of your pot as you are dyeing it, because it will leave smudges and other really dark spots on the plastic. As an aside, do not use this RIT synthetic dye. I tried using this on another piece of PETG and it just didn't work out, so the videos that I've watched online have shown that they have been using that iDye Poly, so that's what I'll be using, and I hope to get the same results as they have. We will just be filling this pot up about halfway with some water. We will be bringing it to a boil, adding in our iDye Poly packets, and there's a color intensifier that comes with it. We'll be dumping that in as well. Once we have thoroughly mixed the dye into the water, we'll add just a little bit more water. We'll bring the water down to just below boil once we're done with that. I have my thermometer right here, and it will be sitting in the water. Once the water is anywhere between 140 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit, that is when we will be able to dye our plastic dome. Anywhere above 150, you will start to see warping in your plastic, and anywhere below 140, you will not be able to open up the pores enough in the plastic to actually get the colored dye into the plastic. So it's a little bit of a tightrope act. You need to keep the water at a pretty specific point. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this process started and let you watch. Okay, we have got our water boiling. We are going to start adding our first iDye Poly packet. And you want to add this slowly over time, so just put maybe about a quarter in, stir it in, make sure none of the powder is getting on the edges of the container, and then continue doing that until you have used, in my case, 2 full packets of iDye Poly. Then once you've done that, again, just add the color intensifier. In my case, that's going to be 2 packets. And there is going to be a link down in the description, as with the other processes in this video, of videos that explain it a lot better than I do, because that is the entire topic of that certain video. Okay, so we have reached the point where I believe I am ready to go ahead and try dunking this test dome. We ended up throwing only one dye packet in. Here's the other one. I think the color might be good enough with only one dye packet. We went ahead and took some shop towels and we got rid of all the particulate of excess dye powder and stuff from the top of the water line. So I think we're good there. We are at 158 degrees Fahrenheit. I think I'm going to go ahead and just dip this anyways. If this gets warped a little bit, I'm not too worried about it. I'm just curious to see what the color is going to look like and if it's actually going to adhere to the plastic as it should. We are going to go ahead and dunk this in, and we'll just dip it in, swish it around a little bit, and then we'll take it out, turn it around, dip it in, swish it around a bit, and we'll do this for about 8 minutes. Then we will take it and dunk it in some cold water in a bucket that's down next to my feet. We'll see how the color looks, and if it needs to be a little bit darker, we will just go ahead and dunk it again until it reaches the level of darkness that we want. Wow, look at that. After a previous attempt to dye some of this plastic, that's incredible. That's the exact shade of purple I wanted. It hasn't even been the full 8 minutes, and it looks great. Yeah, I'm gonna dye it for another 2 minutes, but that shade of purple is absolutely perfect. Wow. I mean, I think that speaks for itself. That's insane. After the huge headache that this project has been, the color on this makes it absolutely worth it. The RIT stuff that I showed prior to doing this dyeing process was nothing like this. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and get the other dome that I have sitting right over here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get this cut out and ready to go ahead and start to dye just like this practice one. So here in just a second, I will show you what it looks like once the really good dome has been dyed. Then we can go and test it on the actual light assembly itself and see the culmination of work that has gone into this finally pay off with a DIY Bosozoku Light. Alright, well, there it is. That is the final product and the final dye. The color looks absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and trim off these edges that I was using to hold on to the dome as I was dyeing it. And we'll go put it on the light, and then I will see you out in the garage where I will give you the thanks for watching, please subscribe, and all of that jazz. See you in a second. Well, I think that about wraps it up on this video and this project. Off camera, I really quickly just went around the edges of the dome and cleaned it up. I drilled the holes for the screws to mount it to the actual light itself. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and liking the video. If you have any questions, throw down in the comments any questions you might have. I'm going to leave a bunch of links down in the description with the products that I use to do this, video tutorials that I use to do this, and lots of other things. Please keep in mind that this is the first time I have ever worked with any sort of PETG plastic, any vacuum forming type of scenario, and dyeing processes. So it did come out better than I thought it was going to, but there's definitely still a lot to be desired. If you are going to go and purchase an actual Bosozoku Light, it's probably going to be about the same price once you end up considering all the stuff that you would have to buy for this project. It has definitely been a while since I have uploaded the channel. I realize this project took me a lot longer than I was actually expecting, but I already have another project in store for the S13, so a new video will be coming out a lot quicker than it took me to get this one done. So with that, I hope to see you in the next video. Take it easy.